A potentially significant heat wave could move through the western half of the United States, and could we see that possibly move into the eastern half of the United States? Well, take a look at the GFS model. There is a big ridge located in the western half of the United States that's expected to linger over the next several days. That's expected to bring temperatures 10 to 20 degrees above average. However, for the East Coast, at least for the near future, the temperatures should remain around average, but for the southeast, the temperatures should remain cooler than average because there is a possibility of a major flood threat impacting Florida by the early week. If we were to take a look right now at the GFS model, you see that it's relatively quiet. We do have a trough move now moving out of the northeast as things should dry up for your Sunday, for the Sunday afternoon time frame. And if we were to continue to move forward, however, low pressure systems should develop right around Florida that should bring a possibility of a flood threat, and there's going to be a blocking ridge which will definitely exacerbate the issue of rain over the state of Florida, and that should potentially lead to a major flood threat in some areas of Florida. We do see that on Monday. Showers linger around for quite some time. A ridge builds just the east of this low pressure system, and this area of showers is just expected to stay parked over Florida for several days, and we do see that the rain doesn't go anywhere. We see the high amount of thunderstorm activity over Florida even extending into the Wednesday time frame, as I wouldn't be surprised that in some areas in Florida you could experience over 5 inches of rain. So make sure to keep that in mind. And there, of course, is that possibility of flash flooding with thunderstorms popping up throughout the state over the next several days. And with a weak steering flow, the thunderstorm should stay over Florida for quite some time. So that definitely will enhance the possibility of flash flooding with this low pressure system. As the certainty is very high at this point, there's going to be a blocking ridge that's going to just make the rain just stay parked over Florida for quite some time. And moving forward, the rain, I'll say, should move out by the Thursday time frame. That's when we're going to begin to see this ridge break down, this trough move southward, and that should allow the westerly winds to pick up this storm and eventually carry it out to sea rather than staying lingering over Florida. But however, the effects that this whole pressure system would bring to Florida, at least for the beginning of the week, will be enough to cause a high likelihood of flooding throughout the state, or at least some portions of the state, more specifically the northwestern portion or the northeastern portion of the state. So make sure to keep that in mind throughout the state. Thunderstorms should stay over the same area for quite some time. And in terms of what you should expect for other states, Georgia and Alabama, the rain shouldn't be as bad, as the convection should stay a little bit further southward. We're going to see just enough of lift right over Florida for thunderstorms to mainly be relegated a little bit further southward. The stability is a little bit too high for the heavy rain to move as far northward into Georgia and Alabama, but in Florida, definitely expect an extremely heavy rain threat. And for much now moving on to the Midwest and the West Coast, you should expect a pretty significant heat wave as a result of a ridge that's expected to build over the next several days. Let me show you guys actually the 500 millibar height anomaly to show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. So here's a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly. We do see the trough is now moving out of the northeast at this time, as there's just enough of a strong westerly wind to make it move out to sea. However, a low pressure system that's expected to build in the southeast is expected to linger because, like I said, there is going to be a blocking ridge as the slow pressure system continues to head further eastward, which will prevent it from being steered out to sea. However, looking further northwestward, we see that there's a big ridge right over the northern portion of the United States as well, and it extends to portions of the west coast as well. However, there is this trough that should maybe weaken the heat wave just a little bit, especially closer to the Pacific Northwest, but this ridge will remain strong headed into the midweek, into the Wednesday time frame. And moving forward, even beyond that point, we're going to see that the troughing will be very strong along the East Coast, but the ridging will be very strong along the Midwest. So the worst of the heat wave should occur in this area, where you should expect temperatures between 10 to 20 degrees above average. And for much of the East Coast, temperatures should mainly fall right around average to slightly below average thanks to the amount of troughing and convection that's expected to linger over the East Coast as we approach the midweek. So definitely keep that in mind. That you might not start to experience summer type weather until possibly June for much of the East Coast, where the ridging will eventually build by the time we approach June, but this trough should still linger around, and then eventually the ridging will build by the time we approach Memorial Day weekend. That's when much of the East Coast should expect warmer than average temperatures. However, the forecast this far out is a little bit more uncertain because of course when we go beyond the 5 to 7 day mark when it comes to making weather forecasts, it definitely becomes a lot more iffy, and the computer models definitely are less reliable beyond that point. But there is a higher possibility than not the temperatures should be warmer than average by the time we approach Memorial Day weekend for the East Coast. But for much of the Midwest, as we approach even into the June timeframe, ridging is still expected to build. So for the 6 to 10 day timeframe, temperatures should be much above average for much of the northwestern portion of the United States, as well as the northern portion of the Midwest. So make sure to keep that in mind. So taking a look at the temperature anomaly along the surface, we do see that for Sunday, much of the northwestern portion of the United States should remain warmer than average, anywhere between 10 to 20 degrees above average. And then moving forward beyond that point, however, the warmth should move a little bit further eastward towards the Midwest. Headed into the Monday timeframe, we see that the warmer temperatures during the mid-afternoon time frame become 10 to 20 degrees above average, and we do see that for the southeast, of course, due to this trough that's expected to linger and potentially bring a flood threat to Florida. Temperatures should remain below average for much of the week, but we see that this heat wave lasts for quite some time, so you should expect temperatures close to the 90s in some areas in the northern Midwest, but mostly in the 80s, as this ridge should remain pretty strong for temperatures to remain much warmer than average. So make sure to keep that in mind, and we could potentially see that warmth move eastward into Memorial Day weekend, so keep that in mind for the East Coast if you're hoping to go to the beach, because that might be the perfect time to go with the temperatures approaching more like summer temperatures rather than the spring temperatures you're expected to experience, or at least over the next week. As beyond, I'll say, the 6-day mark, that's when you could potentially see the temperatures raise up above 80 degrees in many areas of Northeast. So make sure to keep that in mind as you approach Memorial Day weekend. So here's a 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, as this forecast was issued just yesterday, and we do see that much of northern Midwest between the days of May 26th and May 30th is expected to remain above average, while temperatures should remain below average as a result of this trough that's expected to stay over the same area for quite some time. And we do see that the warmer temperatures could move into the northeast as well, but I wouldn't say it'll fully move on to the northeast till, I'll say, the June time frame. And then we will see below average temperatures for Arizona, as well as a large portion of southern and central California, since another low pressure system is expected to pretty much be in under a blogging pattern where it's going to stay over California for quite some time and mainly bring more cloudy conditions than what you'd expect for the month of May. So make sure to at least be aware of this as we approach Memorial Day weekend. And here's a forecasted rainfall for Florida over the next 5 days, and we do see that Florida could expect anywhere from 3 to 5 inches, especially if you're near the Jacksonville, Florida area. But this rain even extends further southward into Orlando, the West Palm Beach area, Daytona Beach, and even a little bit further westward into Tallahassee, and southern Georgia also could get involved right around the Savannah area. So definitely be aware of that over the next week, because there is a possibility of flash flooding, and flash flooding doesn't necessarily require a heavy amount of total rainfall. All that's required with flash flooding is just a very fast rate of rainfall within a very short time period, and that is certainly possible for this week, since many of the rain showers that will develop around Florida will be in the form of thunderstorms, which of course will bring a more heavy downpour and bring a higher rate of rainfall within a short given period. So keep that in mind throughout the entirety of the state for the most part, because that is a concern going into this week. And here's my forecast when it comes to the exact area where you should expect a flood threat, as well as the area or the areas where you should expect a major heat wave. So I'm expecting the worst of the heat wave, of course, to be centered right over the northern portion of the Midwest, as the worst of the heat wave should occur between May 26th and May 30th, so Memorial Day weekend. So that definitely will, so definitely be aware of that as we approach that weekend, and then make sure to be prepared for the possibility of an enhanced flood risk throughout the state of Florida, because this low pressure system is expected to just stay over the same area for several days and bring a heavy amount of thunderstorms. But thank you guys for watching, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content.